Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's Tuesday afternoon, 3 o'clock in Portland. It's gorgeous outside. We've got some sun. I don't know how it is for my next guest in his neck of the woods, but I'm guessing humid. That's how it always is there this time of year. Before we get started, I want to thank my sponsors, 5-Star Guitars, for being supportive. They've been encouraging and supportive from the beginning. This show, they've got guitars, they've got lessons, they've got repairs. If you want to get pro lessons from people like Jennifer Batten, go to their website at www.5starguitars.com and sign up. They have no sales tax here in Oregon, so you can save a bunch of money if you go online and buy those guitars and try and perfect your craft so you can get into bands like this next guy. I'm so excited because my next guest is sort of a referral from a friend. I've known his drumming for a long time, but my favorite thing about him is that he's tried to contribute to his community, both drumming and his environment there in Nashville. So we're going to talk about background, about positivity, and how he's coping. The guy is staying busier than ever. So with no further ado, Jim Riley, I appreciate you being here, buddy. Thank you.
And thank you for having me. This is great.
You're taking a break from sessions, and then you got lessons right after this, so we get to sneak you in. I read a little bit about the amount of sessions that you were doing at home, right? So from early on in the day, you sort of mastered this the sort of band leader role in RASCAL FLATTS, and then you've been a drummer with them for a long time. And then you wrote some pretty successful drumming books. But the most recent is kind of a I would say a respectable cause. The Survival Guide for Modern Drummer is, you would think that all the books had been written till that one came out, but you got a modern book that actually seems to be sort of the new Jim Chapin method.
That book's doing really well. I mean, I think the thing that people like about it the most is that it's very real life in terms of the styles that I cover, but then the tracks that I produced to, for the drummers to play along with. I mean, they were a real labor of love. When I was doing the country stuff, I used country musicians. When I was doing the metal, I used metal musicians. When I did the blues, I use blues musicians, jazz musicians. I did that for every genre because I wanted people to be really inspired. And so I've had a couple of friends of mine in the business tell me lately, man, when that book came out, we really freaked out because it was like, he says, there's like 12 albums of music there. And I'm like, yeah, it took 2 years to do the music, but I wanted to do it right. And it's been, obviously 5 years later, it's been received really well. I mean, it gets used by teachers on 6 continents. I have no confirmed teachers on Antarctica, but other than that, it's being used pretty much everywhere.
Your students that are coming in later, are you working out of that book as well?
Yeah. I mean, among other things, I actually have a new book that I just wrote, a follow-up to it 5 years later, called Improvisational Tools for the Modern Drummer, which is it's more like working on the language of improvisation around the drum set, as opposed to that first book, which is all about learning grooves, that sort of thing. So, a wise man told me several years ago, he said, don't write books because you want to make money. My books have made money, but that's not why I write them. I mean, not even close, because I go pretty far in the hole on them because I want them to be great.
Yeah.
But I write the books because it's just information that I'm passionate about getting out there. And, as we kind of progress into the future here, I'm also finding out that there's going to be new ways that I'm going to be trying to reach people with the same information. Fortunately, the information never goes out of style, but the ways that people are wanting to receive that information, kind of like the way that what we're doing here today. The world has fundamentally changed in a lot of ways over the last couple of years, and then certainly over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So, with that, I'm going to be launching a subscription-based education site, for people to be able to very cheaply take, lessons with me online, really throughout the globe, which will be pretty cool.
Great idea. Of course, there are a handful of people that are doing that right now. and not to disparage any of them, but watching the way that you teach, you're a really great communicator. You know, you can tell that you're not teaching academically in the sort of same fundamental method that you were taught, but you've processed everything you got back from North Texas and all the experience you've had on the road and working with musicians, which is a huge part of it, right? You've got so many years of on stage and touring that you bring that kind of wisdom to your education too. And you know, one of the folks on the chat just now said that they were excited about the play-alongs. They said they love the play-alongs in the book, and really, I mean, you're kind of allowing somebody an opportunity to step into the role that you've had in some of these.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to really. I wanted to make it so that, you know, this is a really great example. I was teaching a student online the other day, and he'd learned this kind of one-drop reggae groove that I'd shown him in the book. That was and he could play the groove, but he couldn't play it in the context of the song.
Okay.
And so that's the difference. There's a difference between learning a groove and then being able to play it in a musical context. So I wanted to create, you know, musical landscapes that inspired people to really want to dig into the music. And, you know, you said something about, you know, like the music side of thing. And the truth is I'm less interested in helping people become a better drummer and more interested in helping them become a better musician behind the drum set. That's
a nice gift. You know, you, I think it's generous, and I think the authenticity behind your teaching, you know, is really, it's apparent. You know, I've watched some interviews with you in the past. One of my favorite conversations that I saw was Dom Famularo. You know, he too, like you, he's so passionate, not only about the music and about drums, but about people. You know, he can see the enthusiasm that you have playing drums. I love the conversation you guys had. It was very authentic, and you could tell that he has a sincere reverence, you know, towards you and your playing. And
we go back kind of amazingly a long way. I first met him in the early 90s.
Okay.
And we met on a very weird day. We met the day of the Larry London clinic at North Texas, when Larry London ended up, you know, collapsing and never regaining consciousness on stage. And I was literally sitting next to Dom when it happened, and I had just met him. And I was a student in my early 20s, and Dom was still Dom. And so we've known each other a long time, like literally since I was a student. And yeah, we've been able to do a couple things here and there. We did some stuff in Germany a couple years ago, myself and Dom and Todd Zuckerman.
Oh, nice.
Which was a lot of fun. Another guy that I've had a chance to do a couple of things with here and there. And actually, both of us are going to be on the Modern Drummer Festival thing that's happening virtually on September 12th.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had Todd on the show a couple of weeks ago as well.
Yeah.
And he too, like you, is such a great communicator. You know, when you talk to him,
he's fantastic.
You could see the passion for drums. You know, in his conversation, of course, he's down in his studio, right, where he's got kits just wrapped around and snare drums all on the wall. And he talked about being a 10-year-old kid walking to the drum shops in Chicago. And as the elevator came up and the elevator doors popped open, he talked about this magic.
Let me know if it looked anything like this, by the way.
Okay, here we go. This is what I love, man. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh man, your neighbors love you, buddy. That is gorgeous.
Yeah, fortunately, the neighbors, they don't really hear that much. This is kind of the working end of what I'm dealing with here. So yeah, this is my drum studio.
You don't mind panning around a little bit here? This is so cool.
No, it's marimbas are a little, they're a little covered up right now. But I've got the two marimbas. Those are some rhythm cards that I wrote out that I'm working with some of my young students on. Oh
wow, that's so great, man.
Yeah. So this is kind of the lighting rig and audio rig that I've been putting together for some of the recordings I'm going to be doing, including the Modern Drummer Festival thing.
Right on.
So yeah, that's
Well,
a little,
when he was showing off his room and he was talking about being this 10-year-old kid and seeing the drum shops for the first time, he talked about the butterflies you get, the doors that
yeah,
open up and the smells and everything. And he had that. He said, "I want to create that in my own space." And it
yeah.
looks like
No, I get it. I get it.
you definitely have a space there that I would imagine your students.
Yeah, this is,
Look, this is awesome. Oh, look at
this
that.
is my storage room here.
Oh,
So
that's so nice. A lot of great vintage stuff, man.
yeah.
You've got your crazy touring rack. You don't have those racks back there anywhere. There's
No, none of that stuff. The racks, actually one of the touring racks is up in a case in my garage.
Really?
And one of them is still in a downsized Rascal Flatts locker, just kind of in storage, ready to go for what would be maybe, our next tour, whenever that is. And we don't really know when that's going to be.
Nobody does, man. Oh, look at this. This is interesting. All right. So the Journey poster at the backdrop.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you
that
guys
was
toured with them.
that was a kind of a crossroads thing we did with those guys. That was really great.
What year was that? Because that looks like Dean in the picture.
I don't know. About 6 years ago, something like that. Dean was still playing in the band.
Cool.
It was super fun. This was also neat. These are the cue cards from when I was the house drummer on Late Night with Seth Meyers.
Oh yeah, that is fantastic. That's right. They did a whole week, right? Like what you did.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this was one of my favorite clinics ever. That's me and Dennis Chambers.
Oh man, that is so cool. This is back in your rocker days.
I'm always a rocker.
Yeah, Well, I remember you talking about showing up in Nashville with long hair and a beard.
Yeah, totally.
I didn't quite fit into the Nashville look, right? But I have heard a little bit, about your early days playing all sorts of different styles. We have some similarities. That you mentioned being in a band with your uncle, and you were like 11, 12 years old, and
yeah,
I was a few years older, but my dad got me in my first gigs too, playing those bar gigs and art shows and that kind of thing, making $75 a night, just feeling like, man, this is the greatest way to make some money and get some attention on stage. I think, if it wasn't for those early days, because you had talked about having been inspired as a musician long before you ever started playing drums. I remember you saying you were like 4 or 5 years old and you saw pictures and videos of, was it Peter Criss? Is that right? And
well, I mean, even before that, yeah, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah.
I didn't, before I even really knew as much of what that really meant. And then, I was probably a little older than that when I started, probably about 9 or 10 when I saw like an advertisement for Kiss Alive 2 and just saw, Peter Criss and was just like, that's the job that I want.
Right. Yeah. That's how they get you as a kid. A handful of the guests too have talked about seeing the Beatles for the first time. The Ed Sullivan Show, when they first saw Ringo.
Yeah. And I think with all due respect, with some of the guys that are a little older than myself, that is the unavoidable reference. And I think there's a group of us, me being about 50 years old, there's a group of us where, like, it's funny to say, but Peter Criss was our Ringo.
Right. No, it's true, because it was held in the same regard. At that point, you didn't know any better, and there was the pyro and the makeup.
It was just, the allure. I mean, and it was the same thing when you saw Ringo on the Ed Sullivan Show. It wasn't like Ringo was Buddy Rich. It was like Ringo was playing this music that was transforming your life.
Right.
And for me, that was the same exact thing that was happening on like Kiss Alive 2. And I got the record and I really dug it. But then, there's a whole bunch of other records, but he was somebody that I was really inspired. He's the one who inspired me to pick up the Styx.
When you say that, have you met Peter since?
I have not.
Okay. if you were to, knowing that, you know, you've toured the world, you've done all these incredible shows on American TV. Well, you've done The Voice and you've done American, like the Grammys, I think you've done, right? Or
Yeah,
at least
Grammys.
American Music Awards. Yeah, you've done it all.
All of those. Yes.
So
all
you go back and you tell Peter Criss, you know, as a young child, this is my inspiration, but you know that he's heard it from a lot of guys that have been in varying degrees of success. There are going to be that handful of people too. They're going to be reaching out because they saw Jim Riley, you know, on that Rascal Flatts show with Journey, you know, and they saw Dean Castronovo and Jim Riley up there, and something about the allure of you guys.
No, it's pretty crazy, you know, to talk to drummers and they're going, yeah, the first show I ever went to was your show in 2005,
right?
2006, which were massive arena tours. And yeah, I've talked to drummers that were like, yeah, that was the very first show I ever went to. I'm like, wow, yeah, that's crazy.
It is crazy. It's cool that you're, you know, from what I've understood too, you're very humble, you know, and so you're gracious about talking to them about it and understanding where they came from. You haven't forgotten those early days, you know, being a fledgling young like drummer. You know, as you advanced and you went on to North Texas, I know the school, it's got an incredible reputation. Education there is one of the best you can get as far as a musician can go. My college professor actually came from North Texas as well. He was a marimba guy, a snare guy, Dan Moore. I think he teaches in Iowa now, but I remember him coming in and talking. I think Bissonette also was there, right? And like just prior to you. And I know that he came in and sort of tried to teach some of the North Texas fundamentals at Montana State University. It was not quite as an academic powerhouse, but I remember thinking, wow, you know, for somebody to come from that school with this incredible education, and then looking at what you went through, you said there were like 200 percussion students, percussion majors in your graduating class. Is that right?
Well, no, that's the thing is it's sort of like North Texas is a little notorious for, you know, being, I would say it's like Roach Motel. It's a little easy to get in and it's very difficult to get out.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, I have a student I was just talking to about college and he's like, I want to go to the University of Chicago. Phenomenally difficult to get into, like a top 10 university, you know, in terms of, you know, their academic standards. You know, North Texas was very easy to get into, but to be able to graduate, to pass all of the barriers that you have to pass is very difficult. And it frankly just weeded out a lot of people. So yeah, there were 200 percussion music majors there, but there was only about 5 people graduating every semester. Wow. So that meant that, you know, over 100 of them were freshmen and it was dwindling down from there, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, I think Berkeley, probably the same sort of story.
Yeah.
That same thing from folks.
I think Berkeley, a lot, there's a little bit more of an expectation that people are kind of auditing. They're just there for a year or two. I think there's a lot of people that went to North Texas that intended on finishing and just, you know, it's the carnage, you know.
Yeah.
It's a tough place. So when people end up graduating from there, it ends up being, it's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. You're one of those guys.
Yeah. You should be able to hang your certificate on the wall and feel proud that you made it through. Did you do drum corps stuff early on too?
Yeah.
You did. Okay. So were you focused a little bit on that when you were at North Texas?
Well, I mean, I had a scholarship to be on the drum line. So yeah, that was something that I was doing. To say that I was focused on it, I don't know if that's accurate. I was definitely in it. I'm not a person that ever fully drank the drum corps Kool-Aid. Yeah. You know, even though I was in the drum line at North Texas for, you know, 4 years and I marched DCI and did all of that. But at the same time, I mean, I think what my reputation at school was as somebody that was doing everything, like in a little bit of a rare way. I mean, I was kind of like the only person that was playing in the jazz bands and the orchestra and the drum line and Dr. Shatroma's graduate student percussion ensemble as an undergrad.
Okay.
So I was doing a lot in terms of diversity there because I was playing in the lab bands as well. So I mean, all of that stuff kind of mixes around to kind of create my experience that has helped propel me as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, I surely think that it made you more well-rounded. But if you think about your role now, right, as a, especially with Rascal Flats, I know you wear a ton of hats in the band. You're not just the drummer. If musicians are out there, drummers are out there watching this right now, and they're thinking about their role in a band,
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I'm on tour, it's a challenge enough to make sure that, sound checks are solid, the equipment's good, that you're giving 110% on the performances, and you're staying sort of alert and focused, because you got to go on to the next show the next night. But you're the band leader. You're pretty much running the ship when it comes to organizing the musicians. And I know I've read about you having to hire and fire and do some of the sort of the scoring, right? You're writing out charts for session musicians. And so I would imagine you're pretty meticulous.
Yeah, I mean, the last two, the last full-length record we did, I mean, on all the songs that I played on, I mean, I wrote the charts for the whole band. And then, the last album, I was just handed charts because someone had, I think Kevin had, one guy that did the pre-production stuff had already written some charts. So I was just reading those down. But yeah, that ends up being a part of what I do, as well as, hi buddy, what are you doing?
Can I play on my iPad?
You want to play on my iPad?
Oh, is that your man?
Oh,
hey, how you doing?
Buddy, oh my goodness.
What's your son's name?
Nathan, but he's acting crazy.
Well, that's
There you go, buddy. There you go, buddy.
Hi, Nathan.
Goodbye.
Yeah, I think this is the time that every kiddo in the world right now gets to get crazy. The pandemic, man. I've got
so with those guys, I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, like when we did a special at Red Rocks, we did the special at Journey, and I really ended up being, like a mixed supervisor on a lot of that stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
So when you were producing, I guess you were band leading, but were you having to do the multimedia stuff as well? Like, were you having like to coordinate with video production because?
Well, I mean, I do that with our people all the time. I mean, with Rascal Flats, I mean, I'd be kind of considered a department head, and I have to interface with all the other department heads. So, I'm constantly dealing with the video people, and my Pro Tools engineer that I use, who doesn't go on tour with us. So I mean, all of that stuff has to be kind of put together before we go on tour. And I mean, I'm interfacing with the artists, and I mean, I enjoy that. I enjoy being that involved with it. So yeah.
Well, I would think that you're probably kind of the master of being relaxed and cool, because there's a million things that can go wrong in those kind of situations too. Right?
Well, there are a million things that can go wrong for sure. So and I've seen people lose jobs over that.
About losing the cool, or because things kind of go around?
Because they don't know how to deal with it when things go wrong. Right. It's easy to do things when things go right. It's difficult when things go wrong.
You bet.
And things, it's not a matter of it's definitely when, and certainly with electronics and all that kind of stuff, things are going to go wrong. They just are.
Power supplies going out on units, and
could just be, I mean, computer crashes, computer glitches. I mean, things are going to go wrong. So, it's just how you deal with it. And, when we're on stage, a lot of people have asked me, I've got two microphones over to my side, one's for singing on and one's for speaking to the band and crew, including the artists, so everybody can hear me. Sure. So if something goes haywire with an arrangement, I can say, head to the chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, and nobody questions it. I mean, at that point, everybody knows that there's one voice speaking and I'm gonna be the one that's gonna lead them through, and the guys trust me to be able to do that, and I end up being that voice that can kind of get everything back on track.
That's man, it's funny that I feel the pucker right there when you said that you're counting to the chorus. I was thinking about some of those situations that have happened in the past. Do you have anything that maybe fell apart that was a little bit of a pucker moment that the band, like that you helped steer back, but it could have gone?
What that was really interesting was we were someplace and the monitor board went completely dead. Oh. And we kept playing and the guys kept singing. And what the guys didn't realize was that, and this is a pretty good piece of advice for drummers, I don't take the click track from the monitor people.
Oh,
I take it directly from the machine right into my own machine. Okay. So it never goes to the monitors first. So when the monitors went completely down, I still had click track. So like a minute and a half later, when it all came back on, the guys were amazed that we were still with the video and still with the, with everything. They're like, how did that happen? It's like, I'm just that good. Yeah. No, it was just,
yeah, that was that internal clock.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where it was good to make sure that I was separate from that, so that I wasn't subject to that kind of shutdown, which is something that, I would always be scared that, somehow something would get pressed and it wouldn't have the click track.
Oh, man.
But, things go wrong, I broke a bass drum pedal on the last boom. Like Ludwig had come out with a brand new Atlas pedal. Very good pedal, but it was the very first one they came out with.
Okay.
Sometimes when you come out with the first thing, there are things that need to be improved. Well, they figured out that they needed to do some bracing that they did on the next one, and it's perfect now. But on that one, I broke it. And so I played, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're right into the next song. Fortunately, the next song started without drums. And then I was able to tell Jay, hey, they're switching out my bass drum pedal. I'm not coming in.
Yeah.
So he just didn't come in the part of the verse that we were going to come in on.
Wow.
And then, I counted him in and said, okay, I'm ready. Here we go. And then, we came in for the pre-chorus. And it was like nobody ever knew, but it was just one of those things. Or, we got a guest that's come up, and there might be like 3 or 4 ways you could end this thing. But I'll say, okay, and we're going to stop on a dime, 2, 3, 4, and a bat, So just letting them know, communicating with them so that we all know, if it ended up being not the best call, I'll deal with that later. But At least we were all unified.
Oh man, there's less opportunity for train wreck there,
Yeah.
Everybody's going off the rails at the same place anyway. So you, man, I think about the video component. So are you running, you've got your click and you're running that through whatever unit, whether you've got a laptop that you're running or.
Right. I've got 2 laptops that are running like in tandem.
Okay. Like a backup, like so.
Time code, yeah. They're running, okay. They're running backup time code, and there's time code running to the lighting and video. So when, like on this last tour, when they wanted to do like a video vignette, it was literally me hitting a button, and that's what starts it.
That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
This is the age-old question, but with that many responsibilities, do you negotiate better salary or more jobs?
Well, I mean, I never had a problem with where they always took great care of me. So yeah, I mean, I think everybody was aware that I was getting paid an additional amount to just be, the guy in charge. Yeah, I mean, it was really, the cool thing is, we didn't really have to talk a lot about money. It worked out. It worked out really well. They paid me fair. And, I definitely, appreciated not having to have a lot of conversations about money for the last, 10 or 12 years until, now. I mean, now it's kind of all, it's kind of over for, there are some acts that are very quietly, able to pay their artists. I mean, they're musicians right now, but those acts were planning on going on tour next year. Rascal Flatts was not planning on going on tour next year. So
really, okay.
If you were doing a big finale tour and then the finale tour gets canceled, you're kind of like, what are we doing?
Oh,
so, at this point, and it's no secret. I mean, Rascal Flatts doesn't have a job right now, and neither do I.
Right.
So and when things turn around, and if they want me to come back and do it for another 20 years, I'll do it for another 20 years. I mean, I love those guys. Those guys are my brothers. But right now, I mean, kind of everything's on a complete standstill for them and for me. So my career right now is really, I'm like an Uber driver practically. I mean, I'm a hustler.
Yeah.
So when I say I'm an Uber driver, it's all hustle economy.
Yeah.
I'm playing drum tracks. I'm teaching drum lessons. I'm teaching live lessons, online lessons, group lessons. I'm teaching at Belmont University.
Yeah. You just got that new position, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
So, but it's all on hustle. If I don't work, I don't make money.
As it kind of should be in the rest of the industry, the rest of the rest of the economy. You mentioned something actually in one of the conversations you had with Dom about really you'd heard early on that it was really important to just always be growing, always be learning. When you were writing these books and when you were doing a lot of your post-secondary education to better yourself, there was no complacency, so even if you're out touring and you're band leading and doing all this other stuff, it wasn't like you were sitting and resting on your laurels and just, counting what you had done in the past.
Well, I was always, even, when I was on tour, I was always teaching or I was writing. I mean, there's a lot of the music that we recorded on the Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer that we actually did on the road.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I can think of probably 15 tracks offhand that I remember doing. I literally would hand out Nashville number system charts to the band guys, including Jay, who's one of my bosses, who actually has the show on Netflix right now, has the DeMarcus Family Values or something like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Jay's got it's actually super funny.
A good side hustle there. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they started filming as they got off the road, as we got off the road last fall. And it just came out, and it's pretty funny.
You talked about the hustle. You're in Nashville now. You've been there for a little while. When you first got there, did you know anybody there? Did you have any contacts? Well, actually, the Rascal Flatts guys kind of brought you in, right? Is that what brought you?
No.
Mark Chestnut.
I knew a couple of people, but those contacts really didn't turn into anything. Okay. In terms of work. So, I mean, I came to Nashville with basically no solid contacts and just started showing up to clubs and trying to talk my way onto stage and getting to play a little bit, signing up for a jam session, meeting people, and eventually getting some jobs playing, $20, $30, $40 gigs. And I did that, a lot for the first year. Also in the first year I was in Nashville, which was 1997, was the last time that I had a regular job, which is I worked on the dock of the warehouse at Pearl.
Wow. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
and that was the last kind of non-music job I ever had.
Still in the industry, but yeah, slinging drums. Hopefully that's the last time you had to move those big kits around. You have a pretty solid tech that's been traveling with you for a while?
Well, yeah, I mean, for, since 2005, I've had a tech, but I mean, I just went and played a gig this Saturday and I assure you there was no tech there.
Right. Yeah.
It was a great gig though. I was playing in a house band for this guitar camp. And I mean, the guitar players were Joe Bonamassa,
Whoa. Yeah.
Mark Lettieri from Snarky Puppy, and who was great. We played a really fun set together. Brent Mason, who's, you know, I mean, he's the Nashville legend, and he's become a really good friend. And, you know, several other guitar players. There are actually 6 guitar players. I had to learn 24 tunes to back up all these artists on Saturday.
Wow. That's
So I'm just now physically recovering from that, because I mean, that's literally my first live gig since March.
Yeah, buddy. It's how'd that feel? I mean, was it did you feel like you had kind of a restored energy getting back on stage?
Well, and it was interesting because, you know, I mean, my gigs with Rascal Flatts, I mean, I'm focusing on, you know, strictly playing time. And with some of those, there was definitely an expectation that things were going to, you know, go off the rails into some sort of, you know, fusionistic.
You're chopping out.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was pretty fun when you're soloing in 13/4. You know, you're in a different spot than you usually.
Yeah, man. You had to channel your inner Vinny Colaiuta a little bit for
yeah.
That's a difference from the Rascal gigs. But do you get a chance to stretch out on the Flats gigs at all?
Yeah, there's definitely been times. I mean, you know, I would say, I mean, probably half the years that I was with Rascal Flatts for the last 20 years, there's been some sort of drum solo or band feature that I've written, you know, for the band or for, you know, the drums. I mean, like last year, it was me playing drums, but there's also a guy named Kevin Rooney that was playing guitars, synthesizers, electronic drums, program drums, and he had 6 concert toms.
Oh, wow.
So we had kind of like this, you know, Chester and Phil type solo that we were doing. That was cool. Fun.
Yeah. Did you have early, you know, you mentioned Chester and Phil. So that was, you know, one of the early duos that I saw that was like complimenting each other. You know, it was great that Phil Collins is a big, huge name, but Chester Thompson really contributed to the betterment of those shows. And did you have like early artists so post Peter Criss, as you were really getting to play in, was there anybody that really inspired you to sort of emulate?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we talked about that Modern Drummer Festival thing, but that's all, you know, somewhat a tribute to Neil Peart. And certainly Neil Peart was the first person that I was ever inspired to the point that I was like, I want to copy every single thing that this person is doing.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, you know, and then my dad kind of got me into some Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson records, and my band director got me a Steve Gadd record. And I remember going to see Greg Bissonette on the Eat 'Em and Smile tour my senior year, and you know, seeing Nico McBrain playing with Iron Maiden, and you know, I mean, so there was
you're well-rounded, man. A bunch of those artists that you just talked about were those early influences for me too. And I was thinking about, you know, I had an uncle that was a jazz drummer in Chicago, and he and Belson knew each other well. So he sent me this, you know, he'd send me collections of Belson stuff. And I just got my uncle's 56 Gretsch. He had a Silver Sparkle that he was playing as a teenager. And so I just got this kit, but his stories of those early days, you know, where they were all contemporaries, was really cool because there was a lot of respect and reverence for each other. You know, there's a lot of isolation amongst a lot of the bigger drummers now, unless you're doing these things like the Modern Drummer Festival. I got my
I've been lucky to do a lot of really neat things like that. I mean, back when we were doing these things together, you know, I mean, I did the last live Modern Drummer Festival, which was 2011, doing the London Drum Show, doing, you know, Percussive Arts Society. PAS does a great drum festival within their thing. So yeah, I've been did there was a Quebec Drum Festival a couple of years ago that I did with Todd. That was really fun. But those are great just to get together with other drummers and get to hang out and talk shop and watch what they do, and that's always a lot of fun.
Well, we're real close in the same age. So that Modern Drummer Festival that came out, or there was the VHS that was so popular, that was Gad, Call Yuta, and Weckl, right? That was the one that it made the rounds for so long. And stylistically, they were so different, especially Gad, right? So I kind of picture you and Todd and some of these guys out there, the same thing. There were sideways like smirks and laughs along the way where you gotta, you would share a little humor along with it. Because Todd, I didn't know that side of Todd until talking to him. He's a really funny guy too,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of just real true enjoyment playing. There's no way that he continued to do the stuff he's doing and the amount of work that you do too, if you didn't absolutely love it.
No, for me, that's how I define my success. I mean, my success for me hasn't been about, being on the cover of magazines or, the awards I've won. For me, my best measure of success has been the fact that I can do what I love for a living and, support my family doing it. And I love it. There's nothing I would rather be doing than all the music stuff that I'm doing. Woke up today, I taught a live lesson at 9 a.m. with a student, and then recorded some songs this afternoon, and then teaching, doing this interview, and then teaching some lessons with some students coming up at 6 and 7 coming up here in group lessons with some of my middle school and high school students.
That I wonder if those guys even have an idea of how fortunate they are to have somebody that not only academically is as astute as you, but
I think some of that stuff will probably sink in a little bit later as it did with me, with some of the the opportunities that I had, but for right now, I mean, it's just pretty normal to them that they they come to Jim Rowley's house every week and they take a drum lesson. And that's the way that I wanted it, because I mean, I have a real acknowledgement of the fact that I am not famous. I am not a rock star. I am, slightly drum famous, but, that doesn't translate into any sort of, widespread fame. And the reason I bring that up is not for any sort of self-deprecating reason, but to point out the advantages of it, which is, if I was famous, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm doing. I can give parents my phone number. I can have kids come to my house, and there's not this whole thing where, I mean, they just can't get over the fact that they're, at a celebrity's house or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's none of that. I think that, parents are certainly impressed with, oh, wow, that's cool that I did these things. But ultimately, if I wasn't able to teach their kid, that magic dust probably wears off pretty quickly.
In terms of inspiration and sort of legacy, it's great. I don't know if you have more children than Nathan there, but
I do.
Me, as a dad, I try to instill. I've got a wonderful drummer son, 2 kids. One's a drummer, one's a singer.
My daughter just peeked in just a minute ago, and she is 12, and she is in my class at 7:00 tonight.
Oh, okay, right on. I teaching your kids you must be an incredible educator, because the last thing my son wanted to do ever was to.
I'm doing okay with it. I'm doing okay. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I was surprised she wanted to be in my class, but she really did. And she's doing really great. She's always had a lot of talent for the drums. I mean, she's just kind of artistically, gifted in a lot of different ways, but she really enjoys the drums. I think she enjoys the extra time we get to spend together. And so she's having a great time playing in band at school and all that stuff. It's been really great.
Is she doing virtual school, like, or
they're 2 days a week. They're in live school right now.
Okay. They haven't delved into it yet here in Portland. They're still doing all the virtual, except for a couple of private schools. But I think it's an interesting time for kids to go back, thinking about socialization and how the teachers have to completely evolve, to teach.
Yeah, my sister's a teacher, so she's dealing with some of those realities herself right now.
It's brutal, man. But what I was getting to with the legacy and the inspiration was that my older son, who was a phenomenal drummer. You mentioned Neil Peart earlier. Rush was all he wanted to listen to. Neil was God to him. And so we were down in LA a couple of years ago. Nate Morton on The Voice is a dear friend of mine. And he had us in the studio where we were watching them record a bunch of the session work, where they would record the artists that were progressing on the show, and then they would upload those to iTunes. So the whole process, it was amazing how fast they were tracking these songs. And I was amazed at the functionality and the assembly line sort of process they had in there. So I'm kind of taking mental notes about all the things going on. And my son really was kind of disinterested, and he loves Nate. He and Nate are close, but the engineer said, aren't you wanting to see what Nate's doing in there? And he goes, oh, unless he's going to do some Rush stuff. And the engineer said, so that's all you're into? And Nate could hear him through the talkback, so he came out afterwards and he said, so do you ever hear like Vinny Colaiuta? And he said, yeah, my dad's talked about him a bunch. And he said, well, there's a reason for it. And so we went out to the car and we listened to Vinny for about an hour and a half, all these obscure songs that I'd never heard, that Nate had, these bootlegs. And then my son at the end said, so play me some of Vinny's lyrics. And then I said, okay, that is the real substantial part for him, that he meant something. It was the sort of cinematic part of, Neil's writing that wasn't so much, the orchestration of his drumming, but his contribution to the band. And I had to take a back seat. I thought, I got so into being a drummer and not really listening to lyrics. So how about you? Are you one of the kind of guys that listen to all facets of the music, or can you sit down? And
I am a lot more into melody and harmony than I am into lyrics, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
That's just like where my focus is. I mean, when I'll write a Nashville number system chart, I'll hear a song and I will start writing out, the harmonic structure of the song. And as I'm doing that, I'm taking note of the melody. So like, I just, here, this is really funny. So, okay. I was just saying, I was just reading a message from one of my students tonight. They're keeping him home from his lesson because he doesn't feel good today. These days, it's like when a kid doesn't feel good, you go, he didn't feel good, or does he have COVID?
Right. Yeah, so, I know. Isn't that horrible that's the first thought?
Yeah. Oh. It's just such a weird thing. So the parents keeping him home. What were we saying? What were we just saying?
You were talking about taking the melody and writing out the Nashville.
Yeah. So for me, like, what's funny is the client that I just worked for, what they didn't know is he's a great guitar player, great singer. But on the demo was kind of really like ahead a little bit on some of the guitar parts.
Okay.
So what I did was I played, and I knew that a lot of what he was doing was scratch. So I listened to the whole thing. I charted the whole thing. And then I turned everything off and I played to the click.
Really?
And so for me, I was playing to the click and I was listening to the song in my head based on looking at the Nashville number system chart and kind of recreating the harmonization and melody of the song in my head. And I do that a lot.
That's a really interesting. I'd love to see that playthrough. If you videotaped that, so you'd hear the track.
It'd be really super boring.
Well,
it'd be super boring.
Maybe to anybody else but a drummer.
Like, it's like you hear me kind of play it all the way through, and then you hear me go back to the beginning and unmute the band, and then you hear it, because then he was like, "Oh wow, this is great."
Yeah. Well, man, I would think that using that Nashville number system, understanding melody and harmony really makes the, the charting that much more authentic, right? When you're having to
Well,
chart out
it's
these
super
parts.
clear.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could see everything about the song. And there were, for me, there were definitely very small challenges with the way that I wanted to orchestrate the song. Played the first verse on the side stick. Chorus was hi-hat and snare. But then I went to the second verse. I decided to stay on the snare. So then I was like, when I go to the chorus, am I going to go to the open hi-hat? I decided not to. I decided to keep the orchestration on the hi-hat and snare. And then, I was using the ride for the intro and the turnaround and the solo. But then after the solo, I decided to give the last chorus a lift by staying on the ride cymbal. But for me, like, I'm thinking about every one of those decisions, and I'm thinking about them literally before I play one note. I'm kind of looking at all of those, solutions, because I'm able to look at the song with kind of a bird's eye view.
That's just time. That's the 10,000 hours plus that you put in the studio. If you were to try and explain that to one of your students and say, this is what you do. Yeah. I have a feeling that they
well, not a lot of people do it that way. I have a client that I do a lot of work for, where he has demos that artists will give him and they're not to a click. And the very first thing that's going down is drums, and he's engineering and I'm playing drums. And so I go down by myself on music all the time. And I'm used to that.
Yeah.
So it's a tool that I can use if I need to get, like if the demo is a little push pulley, and the thing is the demo isn't gonna, those pushy pulley parts aren't going to be there in the end.
Right. Yeah.
So for me, if I'm playing with those, then my drums get all push pulley, and then, so it's better for me to just sometimes to just go, okay, you know what, I'm just going to play with click, and then, everything's going to get figured out later.
That's, man. Do you have engineers that you really resonate well with?
Yeah, sure. Sure. I mean, I've got a guy that I'm going to be doing a record for coming up pretty soon, and he was the house engineer at Jay's studio for about 10 years. And when we did a special at Red Rocks, which has been on Access TV, which is great.
Okay.
But I'm hoping at the end of this year that Rascal Flatts is just going to put it out into the universe, because it's a great special. And I really enjoy this guy named Sean Neff that has worked for us. As soon as we got done with that, I called management and I said, hey, who's going to mix this? They said, I don't know yet. I said, you should get Sean Neff to mix it. And then I called Sean, and Sean did it. And he's amazing, because he doesn't over tinker with stuff. He wants to make it sound as natural as possible. He'd rather it sound natural and not perfect than unnatural and perfect.
Sure. Yeah, but I think as musicians, when we hear something like that, and we hear something so overproduced that that it sounded nothing like that when the show first happened, So
yeah, that's super annoying for me. Yeah. That's super annoying for me when it gets that way, because I want to make sure that the tones that I've worked hard to make sure are great are actually something that translate. And nothing's more disappointing than just have somebody like sound replace your drums because they're lazy.
Right.
I don't dig that at all. So
you've got your student in right now.
I do. My students are showing up. Yeah,
I love that, man. Well, let me ask you two things. I was just going to say, we talked about legacy and inspiration, and I had heard this quote that I use often from Jim Carrey years ago. He talked to these marketing students that said that the effect you have on others is the most valuable form of currency there is. And so you talked about your level of success being able to provide for your family and to love what you do. But the other part of it is that you're affecting, like your student right there, somebody in a really positive way all the time, whether it be the books that you're doing with your education or the online stuff. There's endless material that you've put out online that, you know, isn't asking for money. It's just sharing the wealth in terms of,
Yeah, it's about having a, you know, a legacy where you feel like you're making a contribution to the world. And, you know, that's something I think about a lot with the 3 books that I've written, and with the actually I'm really excited about the, you know, the online academy I'm going to be doing. It's going to be drumdojoacademy.com is what it's going to be. Don't go there now because there's nothing there yet, I assure you.
But if we put a link to your primary account so that people
Yeah.
can find out that, so your Jim Riley personal, like that, jimriley.com, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's Jim Riley Music. Everything pretty much for me is Jim Riley Music. And you can find me Jim Riley Music on Instagram. But yeah, that's going to be coming together. But I think that's going to be great because I'm certainly not comparing myself to somebody like Ted Reed or Jim Chapin. But could you imagine if we had just hours and hours of video of them actually teaching their concepts?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the idea of what I'll be doing. I'll be teaching the concepts in a way that, like the books and different things and the recordings, where that stuff will certainly outlast me in this world. And I think that's pretty cool.
I love it, man. What a great contribution to the planet, in the drumming planet, the drumming world, for sure. Well, last question for you, man. You have any dirt or inside scoop that you want me to pass on to Rich Redmond? Any tricks I can catch him in?
Oh man, no, man. You know, that guy. He's like my brother, man. You know, we go way back. We went to North Texas for a year together while he was getting his master's and I was finishing up my bachelor's. We moved to Nashville within 2 weeks of each other. I ended up crashing into his apartment for about 6 months. I helped him get some of his first artist gigs, and he's one of the people that inspired me to start doing the drum camps that I've done. So we go way back. We try to celebrate each other's successes, and he's something else.
That's so good, man. I love it. I wasn't really looking for dirt. I just think it's fun to have some inside scoop that we can pass on. But I'll certainly tell him you said hi from the show. Yeah. Folks, thank you so much for hanging out with Jim Riley. It really is a pleasure to get to meet you for sure in person. So go to jimrileymusic.com and make sure that you keep an eye out, because he'll have the Drum Dojo site set up shortly, and hopefully you can sign up for some lessons there as well.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram, say hi. Hit me up on Facebook, say hello. I'll definitely hit you back.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you so much, buddy. Have a great week. Stay healthy, and good luck with your student this afternoon.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, folks.